You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. We've got an action-packed bulletin lined up for you. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will be on a two-day visit to Germany beginning today. During this visit to Berlin, Dr. Jaishankar will meet the German Federal Foreign Minister as well as other key leaders. US Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump will come face-to-face for the first time at ABC's presidential debate. The United States has announced it would invest in expanding India's semiconductor industry as Washington seeks to diversify supplies of the critical technology away from China and away from Taiwan. Equity markets across the world traded down last week. Two major economic indicators for the US that were released show that the US economy may contract sooner and stronger than expected. Apple will sell the just launched iPhone 16 Pro lineup in India at approximately 15,000 rupees lower than its predecessor's launch prices as it expands the benefits from reduced import duties and expanding local manufacturing to consumers. Typhoon Yagi, Asia's most powerful storm this year, left dozens dead in northern Vietnam and widespread damage as it churned westwards. Our big focus, well, from Riyadh, Dr. Jaishankar is travelling to Germany where he will meet the German Foreign Minister as well as the leadership and other ministers from the German government in order to review bilateral relations. This will actually be his third bilateral visit to Berlin. And as you know, India and Germany share a robust strategic partnership, with Germany actually being a key trade partner and major FDI source. On the third and final leg of his trip, Dr. Jaishankar will be in Geneva. Mohammed Ghazali is tracking the finer details of Dr. Jaishankar's short Europe touchdown. He joins us live at the moment. Ghazali, take us through the plan of action of the Foreign Minister's two-day Berlin visit.
See, Parmeshwar, as you rightly mentioned, this trip is very significant because Germany is not our partner in energy or solar alliance, but it is also a very reliant partner when it comes to defense procurement and is a very important partner in the entire European region. Also, German Chancellor is scheduled to visit India next month. So before his visit, Mr. Jaishankar is there to discuss a gamut of issues of all the bilateral ties related to trade, investment, defense, energy sector, and different other sectors. And also, you see that there is global conflict happening, and many countries have voiced their opinion that perhaps India could be a possible peacemaker when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine, Russia, or even in the West Asia. So considering the changing situation at global level, Mr. Jaishankar's visit is very relevant there. And also it will improve our ties with Germany, as German Chancellor is also supposed to visit India next month. So be it related to the trade sector, be it related to energy sector or our defense procurement sector. All these sectors, all these issues will be under discussion when Mr. Jaishankar touches down or reaches Germany. He will be meeting the Foreign Minister of Germany, and he's also scheduled to meet and expected to meet the Chancellor of Germany to sort of boost our ties, boost our relations with Germany.
Right, Ghazali, thanks so much for joining us with that crucial update. We will, of course, revert to you for regular updates during Dr. Jaishankar's two-day visit to Berlin. We also have with us, for further clarity, former Ambassador D.P. Srivastav. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the World 24/7. Now, in terms of challenges, sir, Germany has been particularly skeptical about India's trade liberalization measures, essentially batting for more liberal labor regulations. What do you think are some of the challenges in our relationship that are likely to come up during Dr. Jaishankar's touchdown and likely to be addressed as well?
I think the most important thing for us is to recognize that both India and Germany have their own trajectories. There's a convergence, and the convergence is there in terms of technology partnership, in terms of markets, but you cannot ignore the domestic dynamics. So labor relations or labor regulations, this directly impinges on domestic politics. There is very little leeway here. But what can be changed is facilitation in terms of establishing new business, repatriating the profits. Germany is the largest investor in India with total investment of 14 billion. And some of the flagship investments are, Siemens. India, BHEL, Siemens has a 6 decades partnership with BHEL for turbine manufacture. Then you have Mercedes, you have Volkswagen, and incidentally, Volkswagen also owns Skoda. So it's an impressive partnership, but there's much potential for growth. If you compare German investment in India with German investment in China, there's a huge difference. So we need to do a lot more work. And I think Germany also realizes that India represents a way forward if they want to de-risk their excessive reliance on Chinese market. And this provides the context for exploring avenues for more cooperation between the two countries.
Well, India and Germany are key trade partners, and Germany is a major FDI source. It's no surprise. But, sir, does the new coalition government that's formed in Germany, do you think it offers an opportunity for India to strengthen the strategic partnership between our two nations? What do you believe is the scope of cooperation?
Well, we do not, I'm an ex-diplomat, so old habits die hard. We do not comment on internal changes, but this will not impact on Germany's stance towards India.
Right.
It is preoccupied, of course, with the events nearer home, particularly Ukraine, and now that there's the migration issue has come to the fore, but Europe has also moved closer to United States. So these domestic and external developments limit Germany's margin of maneuver. But still, India represents a middle way where they can talk to us, and there's a lot in common between Indian positions from areas ranging from Gaza to
Right.
to Far East to China.
So also, since more than 20% of German trade is actually conducted in the Indo-Pacific neighborhood, would you say Germany's outlook is of shared responsibility to maintain stability, because both India and Europe's key interests are at stake when it comes to championing a free and open Indo-Pacific?
Well, we have to recognize that China continues to be one of the largest markets for German exports. Yes. And despite the caution voiced by German government, recently the German auto industry doubled up on its investments in China. So that is a boundary condition which we cannot ignore. Germany is also a member of NATO, but NATO's focus remains closer home. So Indo-Pacific is a region where India has a role, and India has partnership with countries like US,
yes,
Japan, and Australia. Germany could play a supporting role, but this will be limited by its continued focus on China.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the World 24/7. Always a pleasure to hear your perspective. With that, let's turn our attention to the other big story we're tracking. Well, just under 2 weeks before Prime Minister Modi's upcoming visit to the United States, Washington has announced a new partnership with India aimed at enhancing semiconductor supply chains. Now, this initiative will include a thorough evaluation of India's semiconductor sector, focusing on its existing infrastructure, regulatory environment, workforce, as well as the future needs. But the findings from this assessment will help actually guide potential joint efforts to bolster this vital industry. But this announcement follows India's recent semiconductor ecosystem partnership with Singapore, which was formalized during Mr. Modi's visit there last week. But our Prime Minister is scheduled to travel to the United States from the 21st until the 24th of this month for the Quad Leaders Summit, the Summit of the Future, and a diaspora event in the US as well. And in staying with an update from the United States, while Vice President Kamala Harris and former US President Donald Trump are engaged in final preparations for their high-stakes debate in Philadelphia. The debate is taking place as recent polls suggest Harris's surge in public opinion may have plateaued. Since the American public knows far more about Trump than about Kamala Harris, many argue that the stakes for her seem higher. But until we see what happens on that stage, it's hard to determine what a win for either candidate looks like. But debates are unpredictable things. Just ask Joe Biden. Meanwhile, with the holidays now firmly in the rearview mirror, the investment mood is tracking the drawing in of the evenings as autumn begins. Well, after 2 years of rising interest rates, the big question is whether or not the United States can avoid a recession. Well, equity markets across the world traded down last week. Two major economic indicators for the US that were released show that the US economy may contract sooner and stronger than expected. In fact, many investors are nervous that the decision by the US Federal Reserve on interest rates is too late and is behind the cycle. It's also feared that even if the US lowers rates over 2 weeks, it will have a limited effect on its economy that moves towards lower growth and higher unemployment. We have with us Jayant Krishna joining us, who needs no introduction. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us. Would you argue that the United States could easily be tumbling towards a major recession after the job market indicators point towards unemployment, even though the rate of it had dipped in recent weeks?
So, yeah, I would feel that, as many economists have said, that the US economy may contract sooner and perhaps to a greater degree than what it was forecast a few months ago. If you look at some of the recent indicators, the growth has lowered, the unemployment rate is higher. There has been a real contraction in the manufacturing sector. In July, it contracted by about 0.3%. And for 20th time in the last 21 years, the manufacturing sector has contracted, So these are surely not good trends at all. But, they're mixed signals because if you look at the US average hourly earnings, that last month went up. New jobs did get created. The expectation was that about 160,000 jobs will get created. That didn't happen, but about 142,000 jobs did get created. If you look at, I was reading Barclays economist view, and and they say that the economy may not go for a recession as bad as people are forecasting. So there is an uncertainty, which is not good for the stock markets, and no wonder if you look at last week, overall. The S&P 500 contracted by about 4%, NASDAQ fell by about 6% a week as a whole, and Dow Jones Industrial Index also shrunk by almost 3%. So I think this is it's a mixed bag, and with U.S. elections happening, the uncertainty continues and it only mounts up. Right. So I think and taking looking at what has happened in the U.S. equity markets worldwide traded downwards. Last week, let's see what's in store this week. But things don't look as promising as one would have expected.
Yes, some people argue that it's not all rosy, but then on the other hand, you have some arguing that the US economy is actually cruising towards a soft landing with no recession on the table. But sir, what's your assessment? How has the uncertainty in US equity markets actually influenced global markets?
So, one is the fact is our supply chains, our trade linkages all over the world. What happens in the largest economy in the world does affect other economies because the supply chain, linkages because of export imports, But the fact is, as a standalone, if you look at some of the major economies, look at UK. UK's economy has not been doing well in Rishi Sunak's days also. And if you look at now with the new Labour Party-led government, their projection of a gloomy economy continues. In fact, they have said, be prepared for the worst. Germany, if you look at the recession which had hit their economy last year, it continues. In fact, the overall EU growth rate that one is talking about in 2024 is as low as 1%. And a recent report by EU, which was chaired by the former Italian premier, it talks about EU facing some kind of a existential crisis, and they have talked about EU as a whole, as an economic entity, have to talk about, have to thrash out and formulate a strategy to fight. Not fight, but how do you grow? How do you keep EU relevant vis-a-vis China and US economies? And unless big time investments flow in, things may not look good elsewhere. China, if you look at their growth rate, had the overall economy's growth rate had shrunk. It is still not that bad. It's about 4.6% to 5% projection for 2024. All markets, in Tokyo, Hong Kong, the Asian markets, Shanghai, Seoul, they all showed a downward trend last week. Even Sydney in Australia fell. So I think these are, India perhaps remains the only bright spot, but the fact is even our economy, our GDP didn't grow as much as it grew, and vis-a-vis the projection it was there for July figures which are out. So I think actually for the Q1 figures, which are out. So I think it's a mixed bag, and partly the market's not doing well, and the downfall that you saw last week is attributable to the US shrinkage of the stock markets, and largely because many of these economies not doing as well. So it is a cumulative effect of both the things, I would believe.
Well, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on the World 24/7 with your assessment.
Pleasure.
With that, let's turn our attention now to the Typhoon Yagi. Well, the most powerful storm to hit Asia this year. It has caused significant devastation in northern Vietnam. In fact, preliminary estimates from the government reveal that at least 49 people have died and 22 remain missing, primarily due to landslides and flooding that's been triggered by the typhoon. The storm, which made landfall over the weekend on Saturday on Vietnam's northeastern coast, which is actually an area known for its extensive manufacturing, has also resulted in widespread damage to infrastructure and factories. And fast-moving wildfires in other news in California and Nevada has left tens of thousands of people under mandatory evacuation orders. Numerous structures threatened and air quality impacted as the dangerous heat wave grips much of the southwestern US. In fact, several of the fires are in California, in Washington and Idaho. They are forming their own thunderstorms with extreme and shifting winds at the surface, making it more difficult for firefighters to fight the flames. But excessive heat warnings remain in effect across Southern California as the rare September heat wave continues. Well, news and updates continue in a moment right here on NDTV 24/7. We're stepping to a very short break for now. Welcome back. Katherine, the Princess of Wales, announced that she had completed chemotherapy for her cancer, lifting a cloud from the British royal family after an anguished period in which she and her father-in-law, King Charles III, had both been stricken with serious illness. But this videotaped announcement was highly personal, offering home movie-style glimpses of her with her husband and their 3 children. But it left many questions unanswered: whether her doctors have declared her medically free of cancer, whether she is still undergoing other forms of treatment, and her prognosis for a full recovery. In other crucial news, Israeli missile strikes in central Syria have resulted in at least 25 deaths and dozens of injuries, according to the Syrian health minister. A military source informed local media that around 11:20 p.m. local time over the weekend on Sunday, Israeli forces conducted an airstrike from northwestern Lebanon, targeting several military positions in central Syria. But the Syrian health minister has condemned the recent missile strikes as brutal and barbaric aggression Officials, in fact, added that these strikes inflicted severe damage on water and electricity infrastructure, and they emphasized that the attack primarily targeted civilian areas, noting that the majority of those killed and wounded were civilians. An American actor, James Earl Jones, best known for being the voices of the Star Wars villain Darth Vader, has died aged 93. He actually died early on Monday morning, surrounded by his family. And as you know, Jones starred in dozens of films, including Field of Dreams, Coming to America, Conan the Barbarian, and The Lion King. But he was best known for giving the Star Wars supervillain Darth Vader his distinctive, gravelly voice. Let's get your tech update now. Apple's biggest event of the year arrived, and with it, the iPhone 16 lineup and a slew of AI-related updates for iOS 18. Apple Intelligence was the star of the Apple event this year, and Apple's lineup of announcements echoed many of the anticipated hardware reveals, including the new iPhone 16, AirPods 4, the Apple Watch Series 10, and more. Now, whether Monday's reveals end up inspiring or delaying a super cycle of customers adopting the new iPhone 16 lineup remains to be seen, but Apple's focus on artificial intelligence as a core part of its sales pitch moving forward is now clearer than before. In top entertainment news, Selena Gomez has revealed she will be unable to carry a child to term due to her ongoing medical issues, which would mean pregnancy would pose a risk to both herself and a fetus. In fact, in an interview with Vanity Fair, the Only Murders in the Building actor and former Disney star said she had planned to start a family by the time she turned 35, but she said, "I haven't ever said this, but I unfortunately cannot carry my own children." She further added, "I have a lot of medical issues that would put my life and the baby's in jeopardy. That was something I had to grieve for a while." The 32-year-old didn't specify which medical issue in the interview, but she has previously spoken about being diagnosed with lupus in 2015, a disease where the immune system attacks its own tissues and organs.